Dale Evans lived a life that looked like it was glowing with faith, music, and romance. She stood proudly beside Roy Rogers, the cowboy legend loved by millions. But behind all that Western shine and Hollywood sparkle was a story marked by secrets, heartbreak, and the heavy truth she carried for decades. In her final years, when the pain just couldn't stay quiet anymore, she finally opened up about the real story of her marriage and the regrets that haunted her for the rest of her life. A childhood full of struggles and early heartbreak. Before she ever became the Queen of the West, Dale Evans was simply Frances Octavia Smith, born October 31st, 1912, in Uvalde, Texas. Her childhood was nothing like the polished Hollywood image people later saw. Raised partly by her uncle, Dr. L.D. Massey in Arkansas, she grew up in an unstable environment that forced her to grow up fast, way too fast, honestly. At just 14, she eloped with Thomas F. Fox. By the age of 15, she had already become a mother to Thomas Jr., nicknamed Tommy. But that young marriage fell apart within a year, leaving Frances a divorced teenage mother, abandoned in Memphis and struggling just to get by. To support herself and her child, she turned to music. In the late 1920s, she found work singing and playing piano at local radio stations WMC and WREC. She had real talent, no doubt about it, but she kept running into rejection, money problems, and the harsh judgment of being a single mother at a time when Hollywood expected women to have squeaky clean reputations. By 1929, her first divorce was finalized. Determined to start over and reinvent herself, she remarried that same year to August Wayne Johns. But yeah, that relationship didn't last either, ending in 1935. The real turning point came in the 1930s when a Louisville radio station manager suggested she change her name. Frances Octavia Smith was reborn as Dale Evans. The name was sharp, catchy, and honestly pretty perfect for show business. Suddenly, things started moving. Her smooth, silky voice soon landed her a contract at 20th Century Fox. But that contract came with a serious price. Studio executives forced her to erase parts of her past. They insisted she claim that her son Tommy was actually her younger brother. For years, she lived with that lie, playing the role of a wholesome rising star while quietly grieving the truth she had to hide. It was one of many secrets Dale carried, and later in life, she admitted it haunted her for years. Hollywood dreams, broken marriages, and a fateful encounter. By the mid-1930s, Dale Evans had begun carving out her place in show business. After divorcing August Wayne Johns in 1935, she married again in 1937 to pianist and arranger Robert Dale Butts. That marriage, like the two before it, was filled with tension. They worked together musically, sure, but the relationship lacked real closeness. By 1946, that marriage also ended in divorce, marking yet another painful chapter in her search for stability. Still, Dale's career kept moving forward. At 20th Century Fox, she began appearing in films as a featured singer. Her voice, smooth but powerful, fit perfectly with jazz, swing, and big band music. She also became a regular performer on the popular Edgar Bergen and Charlie McCarthy radio show, which brought her some serious national attention. As Hollywood shaped her public image, she was dressed in elaborate cowgirl outfits, embroidered gauntlets, rhinestone boots, and fringe jackets, turning her into a glamorous Western star. Then in 1944, her career took a big turn when she was cast alongside Roy Rogers in The Cowboy and The Senorita. The chemistry between them was immediate, on screen and off. But here's the complicated part. At the time, both of them were still married. Roy to his second wife Arlene, and Dale to Butts. Fate stepped in soon after. Roy lost Arlene tragically in 1946, shortly after she gave birth to their son Roy Jr., known as Dusty. The cowboy star suddenly found himself a widower raising 3 children alone. Dale, who knew heartbreak all too well, became a close friend and companion during that painful time. Their bond slowly deepened. By the end of 1947, Roy proposed to Dale in a way only he could pull off, sitting on his horse trigger just moments before riding into a rodeo arena in Chicago. On December 31st, 1947, they got married at the Flying L Ranch in Oklahoma while filming Home in Oklahoma. It was Dale's fourth marriage and Roy's third. But unlike the others, this one actually lasted. Together they became Hollywood's king of the cowboys and queen of the West. A partnership that promised love, success, and a fresh start. But behind the scenes, struggles were never too far away. Love, loss, and the book that changed everything. Not long after their wedding, Dale Evans embraced more than just Roy Rogers. She also welcomed his 3 children from his marriage to Arlene, Cheryl, Linda Lou, and Roy Jr., better known as Dusty. Roy, in turn, welcomed Dale's son Tommy into the family. For the first time, Dale didn't have to pretend anymore. She no longer had to say Tommy was her brother. Finally, she could openly call him her son without worrying about Hollywood backlash. Their household became a blended family, biological children, adopted children, and later, even foster children. In 1950, Dale and Roy experienced both incredible joy and heartbreaking tragedy. Dale gave birth to their first and only biological child together, Robin Elizabeth. But the baby was born with Down syndrome and severe health complications. At that time, developmental disabilities were rarely talked about publicly. People whispered. Some even suggested the couple should hide their daughter. But Dale and Roy didn't do that. Not even close. They embraced Robin with love and devotion. Tragically, Robin passed away just before her second birthday in 1952 because of complications tied to her condition. The loss crushed Dale. For a while, her grief was so deep that even her faith felt shaken. But eventually she found a way to turn that pain into something meaningful. In 1953, she published Angel Unaware, a deeply emotional book that told Robin's story as if it were a message from heaven. The book surprised Hollywood, but touched thousands of parents across the country who were dealing with similar pain. Dale used her voice to demand more compassion and understanding for children with disabilities, long before society was ready for that conversation. Her words struck people hard. She later said writing the book felt like both a confession and a release, explaining that she believed Robin's short life was meant to open people's hearts. The impact was huge. Families wrote to her sharing their own stories of grief, love, and healing. Over time, organizations and charities began slowly changing attitudes toward children with special needs. In Oklahoma, the County Council for Mentally Challenged Children even renamed their center in Dale's honor, a tribute to Robin's memory. That moment turned Dale into something more than just a performer. She became a voice for parents carrying unimaginable pain, using her own tragedy to push for compassion. But behind the strong public image, she still carried private sorrow. It was just one of many heavy burdens that would later shape the confessions she made near the end of her life. Fame, family, and a devastating blow. The 1950s pushed Roy Rogers and Dale Evans to the absolute peak of their fame. Together, they starred in several successful Western films, including Don't Fence Me In and Under California Stars. From 1951 to 1957, they became household names through The Roy Rogers Show. Roy rode his famous horse Trigger, while Dale appeared on her buckskin mare Buttermilk. Week after week, they entertained families across America, solving mysteries, standing up for good values, and usually wrapping things up with a message of faith and hope. Their music career also took off alongside their television success. Songs like Happy Trails became beloved classics, perfectly matching their public image as the couple who always faced trouble head-on and somehow made it through. Dale's songwriting and voice gave their music a unique warmth, while Roy's cowboy charisma totally cemented their brand as the ultimate Western sweethearts. At the same time, they were raising a family that kept getting bigger and bigger. In addition to Roy's children from his first marriage and Dale's son, Tommy, the couple adopted 4 children. Mimi, a foster daughter from Scotland, Dodie, a Native American girl, Sandy, and Debbie. Their household was always bustling, packed with kids from different backgrounds, all living together under one roof, full of love, structure, and faith. But tragedy struck again in 1964. 12-year-old Debbie, their adopted daughter, was killed in a horrific church bus accident. The loss was sudden, cruel, and honestly almost impossible to handle. Dale later admitted that it was one of the darkest moments of her life. She talked about the helpless guilt that completely consumed her, wondering if maybe, just maybe, she could have prevented the tragedy. For Roy and Dale, the pain of burying another child reopened old wounds from Robin's death. The grief hit the whole family hard. Trying to escape the shadows of the accident, Roy and Dale decided to leave their large Chatsworth ranch, where way too many painful memories still lingered, and relocate to Apple Valley, California, to the Doubler Bar Ranch. Even though the move gave them a fresh setting, the sorrow of Debbie's loss never fully left Dale. From that point forward, her speeches, interviews, and books carried a sharper, more real edge of honesty about suffering and faith. The woman once presented as Hollywood's cheerful cowgirl now spoke openly about grief, using her pain to comfort others while quietly dealing with her own faith, activism, and confessions about a strained marriage. By the 1960s, Dale Evans and Roy Rogers were not just Hollywood figures anymore. They were also outspoken voices for their faith. Dale, especially, became a bold advocate for Christianity in public life. In 1964, she addressed thousands at a rally in Los Angeles, calling for the return of mandatory school prayer and declaring that America's children needed guidance from the Lord. She even aligned herself with conservative causes, campaigning for presidential candidate Barry Goldwater. Her beliefs were woven right into her career, from the songs she recorded to the speeches she gave, painting her as a moral compass for many people who admired her courage. But behind the scenes, life with Roy was not always as flawless as their on-screen partnership made it seem. In her later years, Dale began speaking more honestly about the pressure inside their marriage. Roy, known to fans as the gentle king of the Cowboys, was in private a strict disciplinarian, especially with his children. Dale often felt isolated when Roy was away filming or touring. She admitted there were long stretches of loneliness and emotional strain that no amount of applause could wipe away. Her greatest regret, however, was the deception forced on her in the early years of her career. For more than a decade, she had publicly claimed that her son Tommy was her younger brother, a lie created by the studio to protect her wholesome image. Even after she revealed the truth following her marriage to Roy, Dale admitted that the years she spent hiding her motherhood haunted her. It was a burden she carried quietly, something that slowly ate away at her sense of authenticity. Still, Dale turned her pain into purpose. She wrote more than a dozen books, many offering hope to grieving parents or encouraging readers to rely on faith during difficult times. In interviews, she said she would rather be remembered not for her rhinestone cowgirl outfits, but for her ability to speak honestly about suffering. By revealing the cracks in her life, she believed she could help others heal their own. Even as she became more open, Dale never stopped honoring Roy in public. She admitted the challenges, but she also emphasized the love and respect that kept them together for more than 50 years. It was a complicated truth, a marriage built on devotion, shadowed by loss, and made real by human flaws. The final years, and a painful goodbye. As the 1970s and 1980s rolled on, television was changing fast. But Roy Rogers and Dale Evans were still loved cultural icons. They often appeared together on nostalgia programs, introducing their old films and sharing memories of Hollywood's golden days. In the 1990s, Dale even hosted her own religious television program, continuing to weave faith into her public work. But while their legacy stayed strong, their personal lives became more and more marked by loss and frailty. Roy's health started to fail in the 1990s. Dale, always the loyal partner, stayed right by his side until his death on July 6, 1998. His passing ended a partnership that had lasted more than 50 years. For Dale, the loss was both public and deeply personal. She was no longer part of the legendary duo that had shaped her identity. Now she was a widow, left to face her final years without the man who had defined so much of her life. In those last years, Dale's body grew weaker. She struggled with physical illnesses, but the emotional weight she carried felt even heavier. With Roy gone, She became more reflective and more open about the truths she had kept hidden for years. She spoke about the loneliness she felt during Roy's long absences, the stress of his strict parenting, and a lingering regret of presenting her son Tommy as her brother. These confessions shocked many fans who had always seen their marriage as a perfect fairy tale. But Dale insisted on honesty. Mom wasn't afraid to reveal the truth, her daughter Dodie later said. She believed in sharing both the good and the bad, because that's what makes a person whole. Dale Evans died on February 7, 2001, at the age of 88, just 3 years after Roy. Her final days were described by her children as peaceful, with Dale expressing that she was ready to reunite with her husband and the children she had lost. Her passing closed the final chapter on one of Hollywood's most enduring partnerships, but it also left behind a story far more complex than the image shown on screen. A story of glamour and faith, sure, but also one filled with sorrow, secrets, and serious resilience. Dale Evans and Roy Rogers were remembered as the king and queen of the West. But behind a legend were wounds that never fully healed. Dale's final confessions showed the world that even icons carry burdens that are just too heavy to hide. So what do you think? Should stars like Dale have shared these truths earlier, or was it better to wait until the end? Let us know down in the comments. And hey, don't forget to subscribe for more stories about the legends you thought you knew.